Imagine you're a worker in a pasta factory. The factory has multiple authorities, the CEO of the factory and the factory's board of directors. Now, the CEO and the board of directors have agreed in the past, but recently, the CEO has been acting against what some of the board wants, and the workers have taken different sides. The factory disagrees on what type of pasta should be made, what should be done with bad pasta, and who they should import pasta materials from. Before the new CEO got elected, the CEO and the board of directors agreed on many things, but now that a new CEO runs the factory, they've gotten into many more arguments and each side has become even more set into their views. The CEO only wants to make spaghetti, while the board thinks that we should make many different pastas. The two groups haven't been able to make any compromises, and as a result, the factory is on the verge of shutdown. What has happened in the pasta factory is an example of polarization, which is when the average ideologies of political parties drift further and further away from each other, inhibiting effective discussion.
So now, what causes polarization? One of the most notable causes of polarization is disagreement towards any policy that is currently enforced today or can be enforced at future times. With this opposition towards a policy, groups of people would begin to debate and argue about the ways to solve the issue or issues that the policy focuses on instead of cooperating to create a definitive policy that all groups of people can agree on. With more recent times, polarization has even been seen in the Senate. Looking closer at this, the Senate's use of filibusters was, at one past time, used very rarely when looking over and discussing legislation that was in the process of being enacted. However, these filibusters are now a regular strategy used in any judicial appointments while discussing over the approval of any type of legislation or policy in the Senate, causing polarization within this policy process with the Senate. In our modern government, another cause of polarization is opposition on a certain political issue. These issues don't have to be from current politics, as polarization can result from debates in any type of political issue from any time, as the divide between the Democrat and Republican Party still exists on multiple issues to this day.
So, let's go on a trip. When you get home, turn on the TV and go to the two most polarizing news channels, Fox News and CNN. Now listen carefully to the difference in ways topics are presented. Fox News is consistently right-leaning compared to CNN, who is easily the most liberal news source out there. These two news sources are how many obtain their knowledge, so polarized viewpoints are bound to affect perception on important issues. Specifically speaking, let's look onto their polarized stances on hot topic issues. Abortion, gun control, immigration, and climate change stand to be the most divided topics within our nation, according to Pew Research Center. So it is important to fully understand how such politics are being presented to both sides of the argument. Looking into the different aspects of abortion, there is a clear division between what people believe is right. These two different perspectives identify themselves as pro-life or pro-choice. If you happen to turn on Fox News, more than likely you will hear a broadcast that favors the ban of abortion as they justify their reasoning with everyone's right to life and sometimes on religious backing. On the flip side, CNN presents a more pro-choice stance to abortion, in which one woman's rights to privacy and the right to control her own body is the driving force behind their beliefs. Abortion is a prime example of current polarization because, as explained, the two distinct sides often find no common ground. As a result of a lack of common ground, polarization is causing rift within modern society, and specifically speaking, the traditional family. It is no lie that the family plays a major role in developing one's character. This is due to the process of political socialization in which one's political identity is formed. According to Pew Research Center, a close-knit family with the ability to talk openly is more likely to have mirroring political views compared to one who lacks the ability to communicate. The deep-rooted polarization surrounding current times is faulting the once belief that parental views are just passed down to their parents, as now less than half of Americans accurately perceive their parents' political leanings and adopt those beliefs. This phenomenon of individual thinkers branches directly from the type of relationship one has with their parents. With political polarization giving people black and white views of topics based around morality, it creates a higher sense of tension and strained relationships that push kids in their most influential years to oppose the view of their family. If this is a trend that polarization continues to contribute to, it will only result in more divided politics, launching our political scene to all-time high in terms of controversy.
While neither side is truly free from blame, there are several major figures that could be easily held responsible for the current status of polarization. The most prominent of these in the Republican Party is none other than President Donald Trump. His opinions and policies, especially those regarding illegal immigration and LGBT rights, are extremely controversial and cause great rifts between the parties. Some of these include his immigration ban, border wall, and transgender military ban. The president now receives most of his support from the Republican-controlled Senate, led by Mitch McConnell. McConnell is frequently discouraged working with the left, and this has led to a system where nearly any policy that is not explicitly Republican dies before making it to the signing desk. Unfortunately, these policies are massively unpopular with the left and get infinitely less support from the next group, Progressive Democrats. This group, represented by popular congresspeople like Bernie Sanders and AOC, is essentially the exact opposite of everything that the president believes. They have consistently made strides to pass policy in contrast with the president's ideology, including a Green New Deal that would entail massive regulations on corporations, Medicare for all, similar to what is done in Canada and Scandinavian countries, and in fact even impeaching the president. Their continued proposition of these policies have opened them up to attack from the right and has been used as more fuel for the fire of polarization. These progressives, especially AOC, have been criticized by more senior members of Congress, like Speaker Nancy Pelosi. These left
People from any part of time can be responsible for polarization under any issue. For a historical example of polarization, let's go back to the Reconstruction and the early 1960s. At these times, America was still suffering from the racial apartheid that resulted in massive racial inequality, despite having numerous laws passed in this time to allow racial equality to take place in America over a course of a century, between the end of the Civil War to the 1964 Civil Rights Act. This polarization has resulted from the Democratic support of holding on to slavery and indentured servitude in the South, while Republicans were fighting for the free civil rights of every American, regardless of race or gender. Shortly after the Civil War, Amendments 13, 14, and 15 had been passed to ease the tensions caused by this polarization between the Democrats and Republicans. However, these tensions remained for several decades despite the passing of these amendments, along with later events including Plessy versus Ferguson and Brown versus Board of Education, to name a few. At the point of the early 1960s, this polarization had evolved to become a giant divide as the people across America supported vastly different ideologies. This polarization had led to most, if not all, of the protests occurring during this time as part of the civil rights movement, including anti-war protests, urban riots and fires, along with the famous nonviolence protests encouraged by Dr. King within areas such as the Birmingham jail. This example of polarization has caused a divide across the United States that ripped communities, allowed racial violence to take place, and eventually resulted in all of these rebellions fighting for civil rights. At the end, this historical example of polarization did allow for legislation based on the issue of racial inequality to be passed, but the legislation needed to effectively solve this issue had been ignored by citizens and postponed from successful enactment up until the passing of the 1964 Civil Rights Act due to heavy political polarization across the country, especially within the Deep South.
Now, while it's clear that party polarization has been increasing due to the tumultuous political climate we've had during the last few years, whether or not it's an issue could be debated. Someone who disagrees that polarization is an issue could argue that it's simply a natural consequence of democracy and that it won't cause any severe harm. However, this drastic increase in party polarization has had a very damaging effect on our society. A study done by UC Berkeley has found that in the past 4 years, anti-Semitic hate crimes have grown by 57%, general hate crimes in the state of California have risen by 44%, and 9% of both Democrats and Republicans believe that violence would be acceptable if their opponents won the 2020 election. Along with this drastic increase of violence and hate crimes, Pew Research Center found that since 1994, the percentage of each party having a highly unfavorable view of the other has more than doubled, with over a quarter of Democrats and a third of Republicans believing the other party is a direct threat to the nation's well-being. This increase in hatred towards the other side over the past few years is a clear issue plaguing our society, and if we continue on the path we are currently on, violence will grow even more and compromise will become nearly impossible. Because of these undisputably damaging effects of polarization, it's clear that we must find a solution to the issue.
But what could this solution be? Well, the obvious answer seems to be voting for more moderate candidates, right? Well, that may not be as easy as you think. As we've already established many times over, on the federal level, less people are identifying as moderate, meaning they lean either left or right. This means that moderate candidates vying for the political spotlight are going to struggle, simply because fewer and fewer people are regularly identifying with their ideology. And think about it. How many popular self-proclaimed candidate moderates do you know of? Hearing the names of more radical members such as Bernie Sanders, AOC, President Trump, and Mitch McConnell thrown around all the time in the media. But when's the last time you've heard of a Susan Collins or a Claire McCaskill? These moderate members of Congress are simply drowned out in all the discussions of border walls and Green New Deals. So on the federal level at least, it's clear that middle ground ideologies are not gaining a foothold anytime soon. But what about the state level? Just look at the Oklahoma gubernatorial election. For years, Oklahoma was under the far-right governor Mary Fallin. Her extreme policies, including efforts to eliminate income tax while raising sales taxes, led her to become massively unpopular, leaving office with a 19% approval rating. The 2018 election led to another Republican, significantly more moderate Kevin Stint. He has found much more success and looks to be having a bright future ahead as governor. So how, in this culture of extremism, did he manage to succeed? Many attribute it to moderate Republicans' appeal to young white suburbanites, especially women. Could this indicate a more central Republican Party in the future? Unfortunately, no. Cases like these are far too isolated for this to be indicative of any real change. However, that does not mean we should lose hope. Bipartisan actions are still occurring on all levels of government, whether or not you can actually hear about them. This past year alone, 68% of bills have had bipartisan support, and 117 bills were passed, both high since 2008 for the 115th Congress. So despite everything going on in the world right now, just know that there is still some hope for an even marginally more stable political climate in the coming years.